Hello everyone and welcome to a bonus video of the Cannes Canon. In this video we're essentially just going to go through all the films that we've seen at the Cannes Film Festival, just to put our thoughts out there. That way, you know, we've mentioned all the films that we've watched and you have a general overview of if these films are worth your time or what interesting aspects there are within these films.
If you want more in-depth reviews, you can go back and watch, we have videos about many of these films where we talk more in detail, especially the ones that really left marks on us.
Yes.
But otherwise, this is just going to cover everything. So how many did you end up seeing at the end?
Oh shit, I didn't count.
Because I got 33 with 2 rewatches, so 35 total.
I've watched 33 by the end of and that's counting a short film program and the rewatch of A Simple Accident and one of the Cannes classics. Okay. So I guess 30 feature films from the year 2025 world premieres.
So to talk about the first day, you weren't here yet, but this is May 13th. I caught Charlie Chaplin's The Gold Rush, which is a classic, but then afterwards I saw the opening film Leave One Day, which you saw in Paris.
Yes.
We talked about this in our video. Hated this film, not worth your time. Just watch Jacques Demy instead.
I don't hate the film, but it's not worth your time. The next day, I started my day with...
Well, this is the day that you arrived.
Yes. So I arrived, and the first thing I did was go to the Un Certain Regard opening ceremony. I watched Promised Sky, which I did not talk about because it's not all that memorable. It's kind of a very typical festival film about social issues, not filmed in a particularly interesting way. Even narratively, it's very slice of life, but not much happens until the end. Really not that interesting of a film, unfortunately. And then I followed it up with Two Prosecutors, which I really loved. It's not one of Sergei Losnitsa's very best, but I think it's a great addition to his filmography, and I was very happy to see it.
The only film I watched that day, because I tried to rush into Enzo, and it didn't work for me. The only film that I watched that day was Two Prosecutors, which I was let down by. I found it a little hard to stay awake through, even on day 2 of the festival. So I wasn't as strong on it, but I think it's worth a watch.
On day 3, I did Death Does Not Exist, which I thought was quite good and really well animated. It's not like a standout film or anything. I think you saw it with me.
I saw it at the same time as you. I did not like it. I think that it had some interesting visual ideas. It kind of felt like a comic book come to life at times. There was some very cool ideas with how the characters blended into the backgrounds, but I found the story to be almost nonsense. I don't think this one is really worth your time. Just watch the director's previous film, Archipelago, instead.
Yeah, Archipelago I think is a little bit better, but I think he is heading in a nice animation direction. It's just that maybe this film isn't as fully realized as we would have hoped.
Left-Handed Girl was my next film, which is fantastic. This is Sean Baker and Shi Ching-su's new film. I always say Sean Baker. It's not really a Sean Baker film, but he did co-write it and he did edit the film. It's a lovely movie. This is one of my favorites. It remained top 5 of the festival for me. Got a lot of great laughter from it.
And then we both saw Sound of Falling, which we already extensively talked about. It's a film I don't absolutely love, but I really appreciate the gesture. I think you love it a lot more than me.
Yeah, I think it's a stunning work. I saw Case 137, so I saw 5 movies this day. Terrible film, I think it's propaganda. Filmed like an episode of Law & Order. There's just nothing really interesting about this. Is it going to clean up at the Caesar Awards and possibly be France's submission to the Oscars? I would say it's going to be shortlisted for a submission to the Oscars at the very least. It's not a good movie, not worth your time. Unless you're French, then maybe it's worth your time.
Looking forward to it.
French people will like it.
Then we saw Seurat. That was my highlight of the festival. Absolutely blew me away. You liked it as well.
I really liked it. It didn't end up being in my top 5, but it was my number 6 of the festival. I thought it was really well done.
The next day, day 4, was the worst day for me of the festival. And that is because it started with me missing my first screening because I arrived on time, but the gates actually closed 10 minutes early, so that was not a great way to start the day. Then I saw Arco, which actually Neon bought just recently, which I'm baffled by. I know the reactions have been very positive. I think it's terrible.
Yeah, you convinced me not to see it, so I will be taking revenge if I like it.
I don't understand. It is a nothing movie for children aged 5. Like this is, it's not even particularly well animated and particularly creative.
The headlines I was seeing was it's France's answer to Studio Ghibli.
And that is such a, because they literally use temp music from Princess Mononoke. It's really bad. And then I saw Bézanville, which was all right. It wasn't as funny as I would have hoped a French indie comedy to be, but you know, the main character is likable and it's a solid film, I suppose. And then it ended with what I thought was going to be the redemption of that day, Sons of the Neon Night, and wow, that was the worst film I have seen all festival.
I think it might be the worst film I've ever seen at a film festival. It felt surreal just how bad this movie was. I saw 5 films this day and it was sort of like declining returns for me. I started with The Plague, which I thought was fantastic. A really great social horror movie that I think calling it a horror movie is kind of a disservice to it. It's not a horror movie, but it's an excellent film about bullying and about masculinity and how those structures sort of form. I've been describing it as like if Ari Aster made a movie about Diary of Wimpy Kids, The Cheese Touch. It's very fun.
Okay.
Then I saw Amram, which is Fatih Akin's new film. It's minor, it's small, it's beautiful to look at, but it's not really a film that I think is going to leave a big mark or a lasting impression really on anyone. Then I saw Eddington, which is a highly polarizing film that I hated. Everything that it said has been said a million other times. It felt like scrolling through Reddit comments at times. I thought it was miserable. The Wave was a solid film in a lot of ways. That was my next film of the day. Beautiful dancing. I just felt like the film was in opposition with itself because the dialogue in the screenplay was constantly talking about being radical and how we can't just settle for like girl boss feminism and we need to actually like take action. But then the songs were basically the equivalent of Katy Perry's Roar the entire way through. And then Sons of the Neon Night, which as we've discussed, terrible.
It's gonna go down as like a notoriously, almost legendarily bad screening.
Or it'll just be forgotten.
Yeah.
Which is more damning, I think.
Yeah.
Because like at least with something like Mektub Intermezzo, which will never ever be released after Cannes 2019, you can laugh at the fact that it was 3 hours of shots of butts.
Yeah.
Like that's funny. There's nothing funny about Sons of the Neon Night. It's just mediocre.
Yeah, it's just nothing. On day 5, I started my day with the film I was supposed to watch the previous day that I had missed my screening of, which is The Great Arch, which was a really good period film, a bit of a reverse take on The Brutalist, which is to say an architect that despite his effort and his integrity and all that, is just not able to bring a project to his liking to completion because the forces working against him, the patrons and the government and all that, are just too strong. And it's low-key kind of like a diss on the architecture world of France versus Denmark and how the system just doesn't work for architects in France the way it can work in Denmark. I saw I Only Rest in the Storm, which I already praised in one of our previous videos. Yeah. I watched Orwell 2 + 2 = 5, which I was mixed on. The premise of having the diary of George Orwell as he was writing 1984 being recited as you intercut, kind of like an essay film of democracy crumbling or failing and these kinds of things is an interesting premise, but sometimes it felt too like partisan or virtue signaling in a certain way, and it felt just a little bit too obvious even at times. I wish it was a little bit more of a nuanced, less sensational portrait and less fear-mongering portrait of what this film could have been. And then I finished with Die My Love, which we both saw together.
Yes.
We both discussed a little bit. I don't have more to say about it.
Yeah, Die My Love, great performances. It's not a film that I think is going to make a lasting impression on me. 23 million is way too much for it. I only saw 2 films that day. So the first one was A Magnificent Life, which is the new Sylvain Chomet animated film. I think we both came into this festival wanting to find the next flow.
Yeah.
And we didn't.
And people are going to say it's Arco, and I'm telling you it's not.
A Magnificent Life was really disappointing because I think Sylvain Chomet is a really wonderful filmmaker. The Triplets of Belleville is an amazing surrealist animated film, and then there's The Illusionist, which is like a Jacques Tati film, and then here's A Magnificent Life that comes along, and it's just like the most plain, boring biopic that you could possibly imagine of an artist.
The next day, day 6, we started with Nouvelle Vague, which we talked about already and we both really love. Then we went to The Secret Agent, which we are also already talked about and we were mixed on, but willing to revisit. Then I finished my day with Peak Everything, which I briefly talked about. It's a very Sundance core comedy, but I think it's a pretty successful one. And if all Sundance core comedies were this funny and this fun, I think I'd be warmer towards that, and I would recommend it. It's a solid comedy about ecological anxiety and about trying to find companionship and love in a world that seems unforgiving and doomed to fail.
I only saw 2 movies again this day. A lot of those 2 movie days actually now I'm seeing. What happened on this day was I missed my screening of The Phoenician Scheme and I canceled 2 other screenings. So I was supposed to have 5 movies, I had 2. Actually, no, I canceled canceled 3 because I also canceled Midnight.
Oh, wow,
That was a
yeah.
mess of a day for me. Anyways, yeah, Nouvelle Vague, Secret Agent. We've talked about both of those at length.
The next day, day 7, I started with My Father's Shadow. This is a film I was definitely too tired for. It's a strong film, even though it fits, again, kind of like Promised Sky, into a very specific festival type film, a story we've kind of seen before, but in another marginalized country we haven't necessarily seen too much of, but again, like the patterns of childhood within a dictatorial system and the looming in the background, and it's about a father-son relationship. Like, this is a kind of film we've seen before. The style of the film is what makes it stand out. It is very beautifully filmed, but again, I was quite tired, and there were definitely some moments I was drifting throughout the first 2/3 of that film. I'd be willing to revisit it, even though I think I'll remain the same, which is to say, solid effort, not particularly narratively daring or creative.
I started my day with The Phoenician Scheme. I've given almost every Wes Anderson movie a 10 out of 10, so I was expecting this to be one of my festival highlights. I think it's the weakest Wes Anderson film. I really like it. I still think it's a very good movie. It feels like Wes Anderson's moving in a less Wes Anderson-y direction. I think it's his least Wes Anderson-y film since Rushmore, I would say. Overall, I'm just going to rewatch it to like really solidify my thoughts, because while I like a lot of what it's doing with the production elements, I felt a little less convinced by the story and the plot and the development of it.
Well, that's one that's coming out in just a few days.
I'm going to be able to see it in like a week or two.
I haven't gotten the chance to see it in the festival, but I'll be able to see it for the first time as well, so I look forward to that.
It's a good film. It's just, it didn't wow me the way that a lot of Wes Anderson stuff does. Then I watched Exit 8, which I was supposed to watch the previous Midnight, but I was so jaded by Sons of the Neon Night that I was like, I can't do that again. Exit 8 was a lot of fun though. We kind of expected this to be like a bit of dumb fun, and it was. I don't know how they made a 2-hour movie work and not like drag like crazy out of a game that you can finish in 5 minutes. It's the same set over and over, but I like the way that the film uses the act of looking, because what is more cinematic than looking? And that's what the movie's all about. It's about looking and trying to spot the differences, and very fun movie. It's not exceptional, but it did enough for me. Then I saw Highest to Lowest at the gala, which was amazing. Denzel Washington got the Palme d'Honneur. I felt like half one of Highest to Lowest, piece of shit. Half 2, masterpiece. So it just ends up kind of being in the middle for me. It's a very enjoyable film though. And then I finished the day with Alpha. I think we both did, and not good.
Well,
you liked it more than I did.
The other films I've seen that day are films we already talked about, A Poeta and Splitsville, so go watch our video on those. On day 8, I only got to see one film. I just saw Jafar Panahi's A Simple Accident, which you can see our video about.
And on that day, I also saw It Was Just an Accident, which I was sleepy during and underwhelmed, and later on I rewatched it and I was not sleepy and still underwhelmed. And then I saw A Poet and Splitsville, which we've talked about, I think, in quite a lot of detail.
So that was your catch-up.
Splitsville was amazing. That was my catch-up day. So for my day 9, I started off with Romeria, the new Carla Simone film, which I thought was very, very well done. I think it's her best film. I think it's her most mature film. And I loved the way that it sort of contrasted past and present and sort of memory as like archival research. Then I saw The History of Sound, which has a magnificent soundtrack. Is it incredibly dull at times? Yes. Was it so beautiful that I didn't really care? Yes. Is this one that I think a certain subsect of people on film Twitter are going to obsess about and make their entire personalities? Absolutely.
Oh, really? Okay.
Absolutely. I think some people are going to be quite let down by this one. I liked it a lot though, even though at times I was sitting there going, okay, this is really slow moving. I was lucky this was not one of my sleepy days, because my God, this might have put me to sleep, but I should keep saying I liked it a lot. And I finished my day with Sentimental Value, which gave me the shock to the system that I needed, sort of reinvigorated me with energy. Thought it was a fantastic film.
This was a big day for me. I did 5 movies. I started with A Private Life by Rebecca Zlotowski, which I was very hyped about. I really love Zlotowski as a filmmaker. I think her last film was fantastic. And this was a big letdown. I think Jodie Foster and most of the other performances are quite good in it, but the film is just so nothing. It attempts at doing a few things here and there, but like for what it should be, which is like some kind of like investigative thing on a murder or whatever, it just amounts to so little, and it's not even that much of a personal journey for the main character. Zlotowski's films are always so interesting because she hones in on subjects that she's really interested in that are a little bit unconventional, and she treats them with a lot of detail and a lot of care. And here it feels to me like she was trying to do a bit of a genre film, but didn't really know what to do with it, or tried to maybe take an unconventional way at doing it, but had no interesting ideas. So a pretty big letdown for me. I also saw Homebound, which was pretty well received. It's an Indian film from the director of Masan. It's his second film, so in 10 years. It's a good film. I don't think it's particularly well directed or well dialogued. I like the kind of grand narrative that it weaves, and it feels like you have these two ambitious best friends that are, trying to emancipate themselves from their caste in becoming police officers, and you could expect that to be a kind of standard, like, oh well, they're gonna get accepted into the police regiment, and then they're gonna be a little bit disillusioned, but it doesn't go that direction at all. It's a very grand tapestry that's akin to something like Hoop Dreams, actually, in the way that these paths of these characters, whether from success to failure, always keeps on balancing themselves out and don't take the path they expect, and neither of them find total success, So it's this kind of complex portrait. It does become very melodramatic at the end. But what's also interesting is that the last quarter becomes a COVID movie. So it's a film that is ingrained in a certain period of time. So it's an interesting film. I don't think it was that special, but it has a few elements that are worth noting.
I skipped both of those movies, I should mention. I gave up both of my tickets for them.
Well, one of them you were right in skipping.
Yeah.
I then saw The Last One for the Road, which I don't have much to say. I really would need to rewatch that one. I was dozing off, and it wasn't the energetic, fun road trip comedy I thought it was going to be. Then I saw LETTERBOXD, which is the Ukraine documentary, somewhere between Loznica documentary and Gianfranco Rossi documentary. And like Loznica's The Invasion, this is very much vignettes, portraits of Ukrainian people without having a main character and going from setting to setting. But instead of focusing on urban life outside of the war, civilians, here we are focusing on the people at war. So it feels like a different side of the same coin from Loznica's The Invasion. Very good film that I would recommend, especially if you're interested in the conflict. And then I closed off the day with Sentimental Value, which I really enjoyed. On my day 10, I started with Yes, and talk about a start of the day. I love that film. That was a shock to the system to me. I followed that up with another Cannes, the Cannes Shorts Program 2, which I was very let down by. And not a single one of these films I think was really all that accomplished. They were either at best an interesting idea, and at worst just recycling or cringe. And I finished the day with Resurrection, which I want to rewatch because I was definitely sleepy, but it still really surprised me. Even for Bigan, I thought was incredibly creative and moving at times.
So I only watched two films this day, and it was Woman and Child, which I hated, and we've talked about it in length, and Resurrection, which I was also sleepy through, but instead of loving it and being sleepy, I hated it and being sleepy. Yeah, that was a really underwhelming day for me. Only those two movies, and both of them disappointments.
That happens. And then for day 11, I started my day with Woman and Child, which again, you can see our video about. And I followed that up with my only Cannes Classic screening of the whole festival, which is Chronicle of the Years of Fire. And worth noting, this was the 50th anniversary of that Palme d'Or. And very sad to hear, the director died just mere hours after the screening.
Yeah,
and
crazy.
He wasn't present on that day, but the fact that he died 50 years after his Palme d'Or and mere hours after the 50th anniversary screening at Cannes was kind of odd and heartbreaking.
Strange coincidence.
I did really like the film, but my God, that was the most number of phones I've ever seen at Cannes. It is insane. People have no respect for these classic films. I think they thinking that it is an old film, a legacy film. They feel more entitled to filming it because it's not a world premiere, so they don't have piracy issues or whatever. There were people taking pictures and filming the entire film. I don't know why you would do that. Who in your family needs to see that? And then then I saw The Mastermind, which I loved. I'm glad that Kelly Reichardt is continuing her streak, at least for me personally, of these slow films that have a different take on something that might be typical in cinema, whether it be artists struggling and showing up, and then here, an art theft gone wrong.
So I did a director's Fortnite day this day. I started my day off with The President's Cake, which I thought was a lovely movie. Great pick for the camera door, great pick for the People's Choice of the director's fortnight. Followed it up with Yes by Nadav Lapid, another director's fortnight film, which is spectacular, should have been in competition.
Yes.
We talked more in depth in this film on another video, so check that one out. Then I watched Mirrors No. 3, the new Christian Petzold film. It's incredibly minor. It feels much more similar to his stuff like Undine or A Fire than it does to something like Transit or Phoenix, which I think are both much more ambitious works than this one. In fact, I think the whole point of Mirrors No. 3 is a lack of ambition. It's taking a Hitchcockian thriller setup of like, ooh, a woman survives a car accident and she's taken in by this mysterious family who have ulterior motives. And like normally you expect that to lead into like a thriller or like a murder mystery, and it's not. The whole point is that it's unexceptional. But you know, the people that, if you really resonate with some of Petzold's other minor works, like A Fire or Undine, the Paula Beer era, you'll like this one quite a lot. It does what it's trying to do very well. Then I finished the day with The Mastermind as well, which I didn't love as much as you did. I thought it was a fun time. You know, for Kelly Reichardt, it felt like a Michael Bay movie, but the jazzy score, great.
On the last day, there really are only reruns of the competition, so this was our chance to catch up with some of the competition
Which you
titles.
used, I didn't use that chance.
Fair enough. Did you miss a screening, or?
No. I mean, I just
No, you
didn't
really just
schedule,
decided
I didn't
to
schedule
rewatch.
anything in the morning
Okay.
because I was editing.
Right.
And then in the afternoon, I had Sentimental Value, and then if I wanted to catch the Palme d'Or, I couldn't book another thing after Sentimental Value.
Yeah, this is the thing, is that the screenings come out later, and it's kind of a guessing game as to what are the films that you still need to see, when are they going to be programmed. For instance, I hadn't seen Eddington, but that was happening at the same time as the closing ceremony, and I wasn't going to miss the closing ceremony. But what was programmed in the morning was Romeria, so I got to catch up with that. Especially, I'm glad I did too, because that's when I was a little bit annoyed at missing, and I think it's a great film, and I do agree with you. I think it is her best so far. And you know, whereas I was a little bit anxious at Carla Simone maybe developing into an uninteresting or unoriginal auteur, at least formally, here I'm starting to see her voice really come out, and I'm more and more convinced that she is going to be an interesting voice going forward. It's her most beautiful film in emotion and in aesthetics. It's her most interesting narratively. It's a film that, you know, is a thinly veiled autobiography of her late teenage years or early adulthood. She does a very interesting thing with that, where she intercuts the life of her parents through their diary entries. And then I caught up with The Little Sister, which I thought was excellent. I think it might be my favorite Hafsia Hersey film so far. It's not mind-blowing, but it's this kind of French naturalism in a certain way done quite well. And I think the characters are quite touching. I think the plot doesn't take all the easy steps or gives you the easy scenes necessarily you would expect. It stands out for that reason. It's not going to be a masterpiece or anything, but the performances all around are fantastic. Park Ji-min, we know her from Return to Seoul. She was kind of a bitch in that film, but here she is the sweetest person ever. All the ensemble, and that's the case in all of Hersey's films, they're so natural. It feels like she just cast her friends, and they already have like a bit of a relationship with each other, and they just know how to be, you know, to talk to each other and to have fun with each other, and she's so good at capturing all that. And then I ended with, like you, with A Simple Accident, because that was the Palme d'Or screening, and I feel the same way. I really love that film.
Yeah, I could have seen something else that day. Like, I know I could have watched The Little Sister, or I could have watched Renoir or Eagles of the Republic, but I instead just opted to rewatch Sentimental Value, because I know that through my work I can get screeners of most of these films. I know that I do not have a chance of getting a Sentimental Value screener, and that the best chance I would have of seeing it again is in the fall. And I wanted to rewatch it and re-experience my favorite film at the festival, especially if it wasn't going to win the Palme.
I'll also mention that on the very last day there was a major power outage across a very large portion of the south of France, so not just Cannes.
I'm hearing that they think it's sabotage.
It could have been because one of the power lines I think was sawed off. Anyway, we don't know all the details yet, but it was a very interesting day because all of Cannes was out of power except for the Palais, which is where like most of the screenings take place, most of the market is, and the Palais was using an independent energy resource. It was like this giant castle fortress overlooking the city without power. Literally all the restaurants couldn't open because the lights, their grills, all of those things, they were not working. This lasted maybe 5-6 hours, something like that. And it was in the middle of the day too, so it was quite dramatic, quite bad. Quick addition to the video, so starting at the end of the festival, so on Sunday, there are repeat screenings of competition and official selection titles that are playing around the country, not just in Paris, but in other big cities, in Marseille, in Aix-en-Provence, in Lyon, etc., etc., etc. And I managed to catch 2 films on Monday that were repeats that I had missed from the competition. They were Eagles of the Republic and The Love That Remains. So Eagles of the Republic, I didn't like all that much. I'm not a huge fan of Saleh's work, but this one especially felt very uninteresting and uncinematic. The themes and the characters are interesting, but even when he does find interesting ideas or scenes that could be interesting to do, he doesn't exploit them fully. There is a scene that should be hilarious, but it ends before he can really get to the meat of the joke. It involves Viagra. You might know the scene if you've seen the film. The film does have a little bit more of an edge in the last third or so, where a really big event happens, makes the situation much more urgent. But even then, like, I don't think he finds that many interesting ideas of how to film it and how to take care of it. Fares is the lead character here. He is Tariq Saleh's fetish actor. He does a good job with what he's given, but again, I don't think the film has such a raison d'etre. It really didn't do much for me. The Love That Remains, though, I thought was really, really good. That's an Icelandic film. It's from Hilmar Pálmason. His last film was Godland. His film before that was A White Day. I did not love A White Day. I really enjoyed Godland, even though I thought it stretched itself a little bit. And here he kind of continues in his tradition of filming things in almost like a photographic way. His ideas of mise-en-scène are very inspired by artistic or exposition photography, not just in the framing, but in what he will put in his frame. So there's this reoccurring shot throughout the whole film where you just see this scarecrow in the middle of the shot, but you keep coming back to it. It's almost like the bookend or the beginning of every scene. Every time you see it, it's always different. Whether it's the environment, the seasons changed, there's always a different way of seeing that shot, and it feels very much like this reoccurring photo with the same framing and the same location, seeing how it evolves. But I think the meat of the story here, of course, is this family that is living a bit of a rupture. The parents are separating, the kids are starting to understand that. It's pretty lighthearted for the most part, and there's a lot of great bits of magical realism that work very, very well for the film. It's a film that has a lot of meat to chew on, but it's a kind of a pleasure to watch as well. It's a film I'm definitely going to want to rewatch just to get more out of it, frankly. I'll also note that the Dardenne film, Young Mother's Home, which won the screenplay prize in competition, that was the one film that won a prize I did not catch from the competition section. That film actually came out during the festival in France, and so I got a chance to see that right after as well. And I was pleasantly surprised. I'm not a huge fan of the Dardenne, but I thought that they found an interesting subject here and an interesting way of approaching it. I think they realized that young single mothers in a maternity home can be, something either we've already seen before, or if we only focus on one character, it can be a little bit reductive. So instead of centering on one character here, they are spreading the wealth, and we're focusing on 4 different stories of 4 different young mothers. What this does is that it doesn't reductively kind of tell you the experience of a young mother in a maternity home is the one of this character that we're focusing on. No, instead you see all these different perspectives, all these different problems, all these different, happenstances that can happen from being a mother in these conditions. And you have this great tapestry of experiences. Because of this, some stories you will be more attached to than others. There's one of the stories, unfortunately, where the lead actress is not that convincing, but there are others where I thought the characters was incredibly touching, and I thought this was a relatively strong film from the Dardennes, and you know, would I have given it a prize? I don't think so, but I understand why it got the screenplay prize. It's a film that balances these 4 stories and tries to give you a kind of a rich sense of what these experiences are in real life without, you know, reducing it to one experience, one character. And the Dardennes are not reinventing the wheel here. They are still operating on their traditional, more or less, one scene, one shot style, and it still works. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. There's a few films that we'll be catching up with in the next few days. Mission Impossible from the official selection, The Phoenician Scheme, and a lot of these films are going to keep coming out week by week. Eddington is coming out in July, so a lot of these films that we're talking about, they may not all be easy to access or easy to watch, but I hope you look forward to a lot of them.
And I know I'm looking forward to diving into some screeners, diving into some...
Because we missed a lot.
I'm not going to talk about any of those on the channel, so you'll have to wait until the fall to hear my thoughts on some of the movies that I missed here.
Yeah, there's definitely a few that I'm excited to see that we both missed, or maybe only one of us saw. But with that said, that's the end of this video. Thank you very much for watching.